Duke basketball returns to action tomorrow against Georgia Tech. And quickly, let's recap the action so far in the ACC tournament. We had a 1-point win by Notre Dame over Pittsburgh in controversial fashion, I must say. A double overtime win by Cal over Virginia Tech, which makes 6 overtimes in the last 2 games for Cal. A clear, albeit close sort of win for Syracuse over Florida State, who just seemed lethargic for most of that game. I'm not sure if they really I hate to say this, but it didn't seem like they had the energy and the effort to like really want to win that game. And then earlier today, obviously, Georgia Tech beat Virginia. It was tied 25-25 at half. And then it just became Georgia Tech versus McNeely. There's too many options for Georgia Tech in that one. So, JD, that means through the first 4 games, and as of right now, it is 4:40. North Carolina on Wednesday. North Carolina is going to beat Notre Dame. So that will mean that I will get my first win. You, as of right now, are 3-2, and I am 1-4 on our ACC predictions. But let's talk about Duke versus Georgia Tech.
Don't worry, I'm already 3-3 because I have Florida State going another round.
Good point. Good point. That will help me. That will help me. Thanks to you. I appreciate that. So, look, this is a rematch. This game happened, albeit much earlier in the season. 2 different teams, really early in the season. Duke won the first game by 26 points. And it was close at the end of the first half. It was 41-36, and then Duke pulled away. I actually remember, now that we're talking about it, I was a little bit, I wouldn't say concerned, but I thought it could be a close game. And you at halftime were very confident that Duke was going to pull away and win, and you were right. Duke obviously went on to win that game by 26 points. Georgia Tech, at that time, had a number of injuries. That didn't slow down. They've missed 4 rotation players throughout the season, that's a lot. However, they have adapted and adjusted, and they have now won 9 of their last 13 games. They're 17-5, or sorry, 17-15 overall now. That's a big difference, and they're led by their pick and roll combination of Nate George and Bai Dango. And Nate George is a really good player. He's the ACC leader in assists per game at 6.5, and he's taken, especially with the injuries, a much bigger scoring load this season for the Yellow Jackets, and he's got a couple of ways where he can beat you, but most notably, he's got a really good step back 3, which he likes to go to. And in the game against Virginia, he got very close to a triple-double with 13 points, 10 rebounds, and 8 assists. He's the key to Georgia Tech. There's no doubt about it. You could argue Dango is their best player, and I won't argue with you on that. But I think Nate George is the star or the straw that stirs the drink, if you will, for Georgia Tech, and he's the guy that Duke has got to focus on.
Are you using a Reggie Jackson metaphor? I mean, your listeners are going to go, what?
I had no idea that was a Reggie Jackson metaphor. I just heard it before, and it felt like the right time to use it.
Reggie would argue with Steinbrenner and say, I'm the straw that stirs the drink. I'm Mr. October. Go ahead. Sorry.
That's right. No, that's right. And with Georgia Tech, the one thing that I'm curious about, this game's going to be tomorrow at noon. They play today at noon, so they'll have, 22 hours and change, a little less than 22 hours, I should say, to recover. with all of their injuries, they've been playing 7 guys. And George and Lance Terry both played the entire game against Virginia. I think the one thing that helps them is they're playing Virginia, which means the pace of the game was not up and down. So it does help. They're not. It's like a pitcher, right? You could throw 100 pitches, to keep going with our baseball metaphors here, and be really stressed and exhausted depending on the level of guys on base, etc. Or it could be a cruise. You throw 100 pitches and you go late in the game, etc. I think that kind of helps Georgia Tech. Now, to round out their starting 5, Duncan Powell. He's like 6'7", 6'8", really strong. Likes to go to the basket. Has knocked down some threes. Decent defender. He did give Flagg a little bit of issues in the first half with his physicality. Something I'm going to be watching out for. Jaden Mustaf is a big guard, like 6'5". He likes to drive the ball. Not a great shooter, but he is a good driver. Physical, good athlete. Likes to get downhill, attack the paint. And Lance Terry is their shooter. Although he hasn't been in great form as of late. He's a really good three-point shooter, though, overall, and helps them space the floor. So they've settled into this lineup with Dango at the 5, and it makes the matchups pretty easy for Duke, with Malawach matching up with Dango, Flagg and Powell. And then the guards, I'm not exactly sure who will take Nate George. I'm going to guess that's going to be Sion James because he's the point guard. And you'll have Proctor on Lance Terry and Con Knipple on Jaden Mustaf. So that's kind of how I see the matchups working for Duke defensively. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that if I'm looking at my predictions, I think I had Virginia playing Duke, so I'm already at 3 and 4.
Oh, no. I counted that. I already counted that. Yeah.
You sure? All right.
I'm positive.
All right. So, a couple of quick things here. One, okay, I get that if you're the number 1 seed, you get to play at noon so that you have the longest time to rest for the next round. But that just wreaked havoc on my day tomorrow. I had to find, I have a meeting at 2:00. I had to meet someone for lunch at 12:45, and I had to find a sports bar. And fortunately, the people at the 2:00 meeting said, "You're in luck." So I'm going to go to the bar at about 12, and my lunch date will be there at 12:45, and hopefully he'll be okay with me. Instead of talking to him, I'll be, "Oh, did you say something? Sorry. I just saw Cooper Flagg do the most amazing thing." But greatly looking forward to this. And this is now the run. Originally, I was saying, we had to go on a 10-game run, and you were correcting me saying that, honestly, we've been on a run already. But now we're into it's tournament time. So it's a 3-game run in the ACC, and then the 6-game run after that. And I will want to comment about the group of people I was just with regard to the NCAA, but let's just stay with this game tomorrow. I see this as a repeat of last time. I see this as a big win for Duke. 25 points or more.
I think the combination of this being the second game in as many days for Georgia Tech, their shortened rotation due to injury, and Duke's depth and defense, just being a bad combination for Georgia Tech. The only thing is that Nate George is really good, and he's been playing much better since the last time that Duke played against them. So is uh, Dango. And look, last year, which is a very different team, but Duke lost to Georgia Tech at Georgia Tech. Do I think that's going to happen this time on a neutral court with a much better Duke team? No. But do I think it could be a closer game? Potentially. If things go right for Georgia Tech, you're shaking your head no. For all the people who are listening on Apple and Spotify here,
Not gonna happen. Not gonna happen.
all right, that's fair. I think. Well, I want to ask you this because sort of a separate topic, but so you mentioned Cooper, and I want to talk about some of the ACC awards because I think this game against Georgia Tech tomorrow. I guess before I get to the awards, the one thing I think that will be important for Duke is to push the pace. I think that could, especially when they get their chances. And then the other thing I want to see from Duke is, the first, I don't know, 24 minutes of the game against North Carolina had a lot of issues with turnovers. And one thing that I'm looking for in this game with Georgia Tech is will we clean that up? And most I just want to finish and you can go ahead. Most of the season, Duke has been really good in that department. So it was very unusual to see that. So I expect they will be better there. And also, Georgia Tech is not going to play with the same level of defensive pressure that North Carolina had, especially in the first 24-ish minutes of that game, which will help Duke. What are the other things you're looking for?
Well, the certainly the turnovers. That was uncharacteristic, and it happened. But we're now at full strength, and we've learned that we also have another 3-point shooter. Who knew? Everyone wants to. Oh, Malik Brown's got the ball at 3-point. Leave him alone. Goes 2 for 3. All right. For the next 9 games, hopefully 3 games, we're cutting down the nets. We win the ACC, and then it's time for. It's going to start tomorrow. We all know the secret for why it was a 1-point game at UNC. Rivalry game aside and everything else, but Cooper Flagg, foul trouble, team didn't respond that well to him being off the court, and UNC had a lot to play for. I know we'll differ on that, but for the next 9 games, every team is going to be extremely physical on Cooper Flagg if they can. They're going to try to get him to the point where he is going to go unnecessarily aggressive to the basket, try to pick up a foul or two on offensive charge. And that is going to be the key. Can they get Cooper Flagg out of it? It won't matter in the Georgia Tech game. It probably doesn't matter if it's North Carolina or Wake, though at Clemson.
Different story.
And then when we get into the run, every team is going to come at Cooper Flagg and try to disrupt him. And the question is, how does he respond? And how does the rest of the team respond? This is so obvious that every coach is sort of going, what do we do with Cooper? We got to see if we can get under his skin. So that's the second thing. Turnovers, you're right. Second thing, can they disrupt Cooper's flow so that he makes that mistake. That was clearly a mistake, both to have him in the game and secondarily that he went to the basket and the guy took the charge. And it was nothing you can say. It was a good call.
It was as Cooper said, it was a very obvious call. Now you said I was going to differ, and you're right. With Cooper, I think it's important. Let's break down the fouls, and then let's break down the sequence of events at what, as you said, ended up being a 1-point lead at the end of the half. How did it get there from a 15-point lead with about 8 minutes to go? All right. First, I want to go through the Cooper fouls. The last one, I think, is the one that if I were coaching, I would try to implement for my team because it was the most obvious. He just ran. Jalen Withers was he parked himself there like 5 seconds before Cooper got there, and as Cooper said, it wasn't a good play on his part. Paraphrasing, I think he worded it much better than I just said. Now, the first foul that he picked up, if I remember correctly, was the shooting foul on Drake Powell. And that's one where you kind of live with that in most ways, most times, because he's a hyper aggressive defensive player, and sometimes that's just going to happen. The foul for me, because I think the charge, it was so obvious that he's not going to make that mistake again. The foul for me that goes to your point is Drake Powell, not just on Cooper Flagg, but we saw him pick Con Knipple when he was trying to dribble the ball up the court, and he applied a lot of pressure defensively, right? And Cooper pushes off to try to create some separation, and that is the one thing where if you're going to try to be physical with him, he's got to do a better job managing that over the next 9 games. I'll give you that. Now, in terms of what happened for Duke with and without Cooper, it was the 15-point lead. It had got down to 11 when they brought back Cooper with the 2 fouls. And when he left with his third, it was still a 9-point lead, but it felt completely different because of the momentum after Withers took the charge on Cooper. It gave a lot of life to North Carolina, and their fans had started off the game crazy. They had kind of settled down, and then especially once that happened, they started to build up a little bit. But once that happened, the energy for North Carolina just went to a different level. And so to me, there's 2 things that I'd mentioned as areas that could be concerns for Duke. Flagg's foul trouble, as you brought up, and this is Coach Shire's 3rd year as a head coach. And I know both of us didn't love forget him picking up the 3rd foul. Didn't love the decision putting him back into the game with 2 fouls in so much time. I think it was like 5 minutes left in the first half. If you put him in with a minute left, I may not quibble as much. But I think
in a situation that you were up at 7 or 9 at that point, you didn't
11.
have to do it. 11. You didn't have to do it.
Right. And it's a great point because if Duke is down 11, I'm all for it. It's a very different thing, right? It's, all right, we're down 11. If we wait to bring Cooper back in the second half, we could be down 18. We got to go now. Fine. But up 11, different story. And so I guess the point I'm getting to here is that while I understand what you're saying about Cooper and his foul trouble, I don't think the team necessarily didn't handle it so well, rather than I didn't think the decision by Shire, I think that compounded what was happening. If you understand what I'm trying to say.
I do. And I think that the reason why we're talking about it now, with Duke's first game coming up in the ACC tournament, and hopefully a nice long run in the NCAA, is that this is going to be the strategy. This isn't like, yeah, let Cooper Flagg, get his. When you say let Cooper Flagg get his, what does that mean? Does that mean 25 points, 10 rebounds, uh, 4 block shots in one half against UNC? I mean, I don't think anybody is going to concede and will stop everybody else. That's not going to happen because he facilitates, and too often the announcers have pointed out that um, how many points did Cooper Flagg account for? Be it he scored, assists, rebound, set up somebody, and the number grows very, very quickly. So I think he's going to draw enormous attention for every game from now on in. And the idea is going to be to get him into foul trouble, to play him very physically, um, especially as there is going to be at least two SEC games that we will have, unless things break differently, just based on the total number of SEC teams who play a very physical style of ball, and they're going to try to get him into trouble and then take their chances. But I'll return to that after you tell me why I'm not right.
No, I don't think I think that's a fair assessment. I think this Duke team on a couple of occasions has shown that they can weather the storm and even play. I mean, not better, but play to a high enough level to increase their lead. Or like the Louisville game, they took the lead and went on a run. At times, with Mason Gillis coming in, they've been able to have success. Um, Now I'm not gonna say like it's a good thing if Cooper Flagg gets 2 fouls. That's crazy. But I am gonna say they can weather the storm for stretches. I think they've shown that, and I think especially with the way that Knipple has really he has played really consistently over the last month and a half or so, and I think that helps because he can do things similar to Cooper. He can affect maybe not shot blocking, but almost all the other categories. He can get some steals. We know he can run the point at times. He can rebound. He can score. And so I think that helps. And then to your point, having the full complement of players back and healthy between Malik Brown and Tyrese Proctor. And obviously we've got, Sion James and Mason Gillis and Malawach and Evans. They're just, yes, it's Cooper Flagg, but on any given night, it could be Evans, it could be Proctor, it could be Sion James, along with Knipple. So I think that will help get through the first 3 or 4 games. But once we get to the Elite Eight or Final Four, it is going to be Cooper versus, I don't know, probably at that point, not Janai Broom, but Cooper versus Mark Sears. Cooper versus, I don't know, pick your best player on a certain team. I mean, a lot of these teams are relatively balanced as well at the top, and there's multiple guys, and that's what makes Duke so good. Great, I should say, this year.
So, if ever there was a conference tournament that was critical for a team that could win it all, it's this year for Duke. They have to take their game up because, especially since we're now at a full complement. So, what's the rotation? Malik's back in. We're going back in. He's the first substitute. Is it he and Isaiah Evans? Is it he and Mason Gillis for maturity in the tournament and someone who's been there? Um, but their game level, that's why I think they're going to win this game by over 25 points, because I think John Shire has got to say every one of these games, 3 games in a row, are a tune up for what is going to happen the in March Madness and the run for the 6 games, because those 6 games, these 3 games too, they are going to go. How hard can we push Cooper? How many fouls can we give up on him? How do we get him to the point that he is um, overly aggressive? And I think that is the point. And we'll see. We'll see.
Well,
So
we'll see if it works because North Carolina did a great job of that in the first half. They got him 3 fouls, and it didn't matter. He just took over the game in the second half. Now, it's important. A lot of teams that you're talking about are better than North Carolina, and so it's going to matter more. The only other thing I want to say.
So before I came on the air, I was with a group of people, clearly not Duke fans. And I found myself having to make the argument that, I always make the argument that Duke doesn't play against the level of competition that is in the SEC, Big 12, every night. And that was the argument that was made against me just before we did this argument by a couple of people, clearly not Duke fans. And I tried to argue, but Duke is a great team. And, there have been other ACC teams that have made it the last couple of years when people said, ACC isn't going to make it. You and I will always figure out some way that Duke will, but other ACC teams, did anyone see the NC State run happening beforehand? And therefore, was the competition that great? No, but it happened. I think Duke is such a good team this year. And this is me now arguing against me.
Great team.
That it didn't matter as long as the ACC tournament is the tune-up, so that they are ready to go in game 1. No 16 versus 1 upset here. I want to know that the number 1 team took out the number 16 team the way it should have. And the way to get there is to use all 3 games in the ACC tournament to have them ready for March Madness.
All right. I'm going to try to get to the ACC awards here. So before I do that, the one thing related to what you're saying is that I hope Duke plays Clemson no matter what. That's my ultimate goal of this ACC tournament, because it's the best test that they can get. And Coach Shire, speaking of that, was very happy in a strange way at halftime. He said it, but they showed it as well on Duke's YouTube channel of him at halftime saying, this is what we needed. I wanted this, basically, to have a game. And he was like, and we're winning, by the way. He was like, we are winning by 1 point, but let's play, better and stop them from getting out in transition. All right, ACC awards. There's one thing in particular that I want to make sure I expressed in our first opportunity since these awards have been released. So for those of you who may not know, Cooper Flagg, all ACC first team. And if you want, JD, we can go through, the teams, etc. But I just want to make 1 point first. He was obviously freshman of the year. I know there's been a lot of Duke players, but they might want to consider renaming the award after him. after the number of Freshman of the Week awards he received, and he was Player of the Year, rightfully so. Now, here's where I have a problem. He was not Defensive Player of the Year. They gave it to Chucky Hepburn, who I think is a great defender. But the impact that Cooper Flagg has defensively is just on a. It's the numbers bear it out. He's just. It's not the same. Chucky Hepburn is a great defender, and I was listening to the Georgia Tech Virginia game, and Corey Alexander was talking about how Coach Kelsey mentioned that their season changed when they switched from having Hepburn guard the best player to having Terrence Edwards. Now, Cooper Flagg doesn't guard the best player typically on the certainly on the perimeter for the other team. That's typically Tyrese Proctor. And we know how important Sion James is. However, for example, the NBA, the Defensive Player of the Year award 9 times out of 10 goes to the best defensive center. And I know Cooper is not a center, and he's the power forward. But the ability to impact the game from that power forward position that Cooper's playing is just much more impactful than guarding the other team's point guard. And I know I'm not saying it's not important. Chucky Hepburn should have been second, right? But the impact that Cooper has with his ability to get deflections, his rotations, his blocks, his rebounding, me personally, I didn't think this was close. And I'm pretty surprised that Hepburn won this over Cooper Flagg. I think he should have swept the 3 major awards that he was eligible for the ACC.
The 4, I think. As a result of this,
3.
All ACC.
Well, I'm not thinking of that as that's a team.
Okay,
I'm saying,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. He's got to come back. He can't go to the NBA having not won before they voted, did they watch what happened in the second half of the North Carolina game? Is there any doubt that when he was swatting balls away all over the court, it energized? It wasn't just the play to block it. It was what he did to the overall confidence of the team. Wow. He was robbed. That is that is a horrible decision. Chucky Hepburn, good defensive ball player. If you're going to give it to Chucky Hepburn, you and I would say, why not give it to Tyrese Proctor? How many games did Tyrese Proctor hold the highest scorer on the other team, if it was a guard, below his average?
A bunch. And I mean, Duke was pretty well represented on the list for both Defensive Player of the Year, the voting, and the all-defensive team. But Tyrese Proctor, he got 1 vote. No, that's not even for all defense. That was for most improved. He didn't get a vote for. I understand him not getting a vote for Defensive Player of the Year. I don't know, in fairness, if he didn't get any votes for all defensive team. The other Duke player on the all defensive team was Sion James, who I think deservedly so. But I'm with you. Tyrese Proctor should have gotten more consideration. The only other thing I want to say, somewhat defensive, Chuck Hepburn, who I do think is a really good defensive player. He had a 2-game stretch earlier in the season, and where he had over 20 deflections, and we've become big deflections people, because of Malik Brown, and that's something. It's certainly something, but it's just not the same. It's just his impact from the point guard spot is not the same as Cooper's overall impact defensively because of his ability to guard multiple positions, block shots, get in the passing lanes, and rebound. I think I just didn't. I was shocked quite honest with you, that he didn't win Defensive Player of the Year.
Did Malowach make it to the team?
To the all defensive
team.
team? No. The all defensive team was Chucky Hepburn. Chucky Hepburn got more votes for all defensive team than Cooper Flagg. Again, I don't quite understand. Unless there was some sort of criteria that we don't know about. The other members, Jaden Zachary, an awesome defender for Clemson. Talk about somebody who holds people below their scoring averages. BJ Edwards. Honestly, when Duke played SMU, I didn't really notice him. Sion James, as I mentioned, and Zach Austin. I think the thing that hurts Tyrese Proctor in voting for all defensive teams, he doesn't average a steal per game. And so I think writers will, I'm not sure exactly who votes on this, in fairness. I know coaches can't vote for their own team. Well, fortunately. But I think that's part of it. I saw this recently, though. One of the best defenders in the NBA was Tayshaun Prince for a number of years. Just excellent defender. He never averaged a steal or a block per game. So it's something where you have to watch the games to see Tyrese Proctor's impact defensively. The one thing I did want to mention, for people who got Defensive Player of the Year votes, Malik Brown, he had 3 votes. Kaman Malowach had a couple of votes. And Sion James had a vote. So Duke was pretty well represented, but should have been Cooper Flagg.
So I think we should wrap it up. But one more thing that I want to look for as we begin the ACC run, which is as a result of you pointing out the number of players on Duke that got votes to be on the defensive team, that it is time to tighten the screws on defense. Because in March Madness, if our offense should fail us, if Coop is in foul trouble, we're not hitting threes. We need to be able to. Our defense is so good, that it can keep us in any game. So let's use these 3 games to show what we could do on the defensive end of the court, and not giving up any 80-point games. I want all 3 opponents held to under 80.
Oh, for sure. Under 75, ideally under 70. And the only reason North Carolina had 40 points in the first half against Duke was because of Duke's offense, not their defense. They let them get out in transition. When Duke's defense was set, North Carolina had a tough time, and that was proven in the second half. Now, one thing I want to say before we wrap up here is Duke's offense. Do you remember? It feels like a couple years ago now, but it was only a few months ago. Back in, December, let's say, 2024.
I was a year younger. I can't remember that.
Well, maybe I'll help you. You kept saying their offense, it's clunky. You kept wanting Coach Shire to run more plays, and
yes, I did.
Right, and it took time for them to gel, but over this they had 80. What did they score? 81, 82 points against North Carolina. And that was a low-scoring game considering what they had been putting up previously. And so I think their offense was able to find a spot, and now they're top 5. They've been top 5 in offense and defense for the last month or so. It's been impressive to see them figure it out on that side of the court, because the defense pretty early on we knew was going to be, let's go a step further, elite. So with that, we'll see you guys, or I'll see you guys. JD's going to be at the bar after the game against Georgia Tech tomorrow, and then we'll have the preview. Cross our fingers if Duke wins for their next game, which would be either North Carolina or Wake Forest later in the day on Thursday. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace. Oh,
Wait.
make sure to subscribe, drop a like. I forgot about all that stuff. Drop a comment. We want to hear from you guys. Share it with your friends. As a pump fake. Now we'll see you tomorrow.
Podcast.
Oh, you're right. All right. I messed up the end here. We'll leave this all in now.
No, you're too excited. It's time.
It's tournament time.
It's tournament time.
I know. I gotta get back to watching the games.
You are to be forgiven, but we do want our base to grow, and most of all, we love the people who've been with us, commenting straight through the year, and it's made it so much more fun to have.
Speaking of fourth thing we forgot, score predictions. We're not a great podcast over here today. Score predictions. Make sure you drop them in the comments.
Right,
JD, you said it was gonna be a 20-point win. I don't think so. I'm gonna go slightly less. 85-68 Duke.
And in order to get to my number, I had just written down 85, but 85-60.
All right. And now.
If I really wanted to be nitpicky, 85-59.
Hold them under 60. That's right. All right. Now, I think I've crossed all of my T's and dotted my I's, so we will actually see you guys tomorrow.